"You're in the way. The help waits outside." Those were the last words Preston Galloway ever said as a regional vice president. He thought he was speaking to a lost tourist or a confused assistant. He didn't know he was sneering at the woman who signed his paychecks. He didn't know that the quiet woman in the oversized hoodie was Jasmine Sterling, the newly appointed CEO of the very airline he was flying. In the next 60 seconds, Preston wouldn't just lose his seat in first class. He would lose his career, his reputation, and his entire future. This is the story of how arrogance met its match at 30,000 feet, and why you should never, ever judge a book by its cover. The rain at Chicago O'Hare was relentless, sheets of grey water hammering against the reinforced glass of Terminal 3. Inside the exclusive Aerolux Diamond Lounge, the atmosphere was hermetically sealed from the chaos outside. It smelled of expensive espresso, aged leather, and quiet desperation. Jasmine Sterling adjusted the hood of her charcoal sweatshirt, pulling it slightly further over her forehead. She wasn't hiding exactly. She was just tired. After an 18-hour negotiation in Tokyo that had saved Stratton Logistics from a hostile takeover, she just wanted to get home to New York. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her hair, usually braided in immaculate cornrows, was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore comfortable joggers and no makeup. To the untrained eye, she looked like a college student flying standby, or perhaps an exhausted mother traveling alone. She certainly didn't look like the woman Forbes had just named the turnaround queen, or the incoming CEO of Aerolux, the struggling luxury airline she had just secretly acquired a majority stake in. She sat in a secluded corner of the lounge, sipping a sparkling water, her eyes scanning a PDF on her tablet. The merger wasn't public news yet. The press release was scheduled to drop tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Until then, she was a ghost. "Can you believe the delay?" A loud, braying voice cut through the lounge's hushed reverence. "I specifically told dispatch that if this bird isn't wheels up by 4 hours, heads are going to roll." Jasmine didn't look up, but she recognized the tone. It was the sound of middle management trying to sound like upper management. 3 people swept into the lounge, bringing a gust of arrogant energy with them. Leading the pack was a man in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, navy blue, Italian cut, slightly too tight across the shoulders. This was Preston Galloway, the regional VP of operations for Aerolux. Flanking him were his 2 lieutenants, Lydia Banks, a sharp-featured director of HR who clicked her pen incessantly, and frantic assistant named Greg, who was juggling 3 phones and looking like he was about to have a coronary event. "Preston, the pilot says it's a sensor issue," Greg stammered. "They need 20 minutes. "I don't care if the wing falls off, Greg," Preston snapped, throwing his Toomey briefcase onto a pristine white sofa, the sofa directly across from Jasmine. "We have the board meeting in New York tomorrow. I need to be there to explain why the Q3 numbers are garbage before the new CEO steps in. Rumor has it the new boss is a total hard ass." Jasmine took a slow sip of her water. "You have no idea," she thought. Lydia Banks sat down, smoothing her skirt. She noticed Jasmine immediately. Her eyes narrowed. In Lydia's world, people were categorized instantly, useful or useless, high net worth or low rent. Jasmine, in her joggers and hoodie, registered as low rent on Lydia's internal radar. "Is this seat taken?" Lydia asked Jasmine. The tone wasn't a question. It was an eviction notice. Jasmine looked up, her expression neutral. "I'm using the table," she said softly. Her voice was calm, holding the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to shout. Lydia scoffed, turning to Preston. "Unbelievable. The lounge standards are really slipping. I thought they raised the membership fee to keep the riffraff out." Preston glanced at Jasmine, barely registering her as a human being. He saw a black woman in casual clothes and made a snap judgment that would cost him everything. "Don't worry about it, Lydia. We'll just take the conference room. Greg, go get the lounge manager. Tell him I want this area cleared. We need to discuss sensitive company data. Sir, Greg looked at Jasmine, then back to his boss. "The lounge is full. This is the only quiet corner." Preston sighed, the exaggerated sigh of a man burdened by the incompetence of the world. He turned his body fully toward Jasmine. He didn't smile. He loomed. "Excuse me," Preston said, snapping his fingers twice near her face. "Miss, we need this space for a corporate executive meeting. It's Aerolux internal business. You'll need to move." Jasmine set her tablet down. She looked at Preston's ID badge swinging from his belt. "Preston Galloway, VP of Operations. There are open seats near the bar," Jasmine said, gesturing vaguely. "I'm comfortable here." Preston's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not by women who looked like they shopped at Target. "Listen," Preston lowered his voice, trying to sound intimidating. "I don't think you understand who I am. I run the operations for this airline. This is my lounge. I can have your ticket cancelled and you removed by security for being disruptive. Do you want to walk to New York?" Jasmine studied him. She memorized his face. She memorized the way Lydia was smirking, checking her nails. She memorized the fear in Greg's eyes. "I'm a paying customer, just like you," Jasmine said. "I have a right to be here." "A paying customer?" Lydia laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Honey, looking like that? You're probably on a buddy pass from a janitor cousin. Let's be real." The cruelty was casual, practiced. It was the kind of racism that didn't need slurs. It just needed the assumption that she didn't belong. Preston straightened up, buttoning his jacket. "Last warning. Move or I make a call. We have serious work to do. We're discussing the future of this company. Something you clearly wouldn't understand." Jasmine stood up. She wasn't tall, but she had a presence that suddenly made the corner feel very small. She picked up her tablet and her beat-up leather tote bag. "Fine," Jasmine said. "I wouldn't want to interrupt the future of the company." "Smart choice," Preston sneered. He pointed a finger toward the automatic glass doors. "Wait outside in the general terminal until your zone is called. This area is for professionals." "Wait outside," Jasmine repeated, testing the words on her tongue. "Okay, I'll wait outside." She walked away, her spine straight. As she left the immediate area, she heard Preston mutter, "God, they just let anyone in here these days. No standards." Jasmine didn't go to the general terminal. She walked up to the concierge desk near the lounge entrance. The attendant, a young woman named Sarah who looked exhausted, looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Jasmine pulled a black titanium card from her pocket. The Centurion card, but a tier higher. The kind invite-only card that was heavy enough to break glass. She also pulled out her passport. "My name is Jasmine Sterling," she said quietly. "I'm the incoming CEO. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to be very discreet about it." Sarah's eyes went wide as she looked at the name on the manifest, then at the face of the woman standing before her. She started to stand up. "Oh my God, Miss Sterling, Sit," Jasmine whispered, a small, conspiratorial smile playing on her lips. "I need you to upgrade me. Seat 1A, and I need the passenger manifest for the flight crew." "Seat 1A is occupied, Ms. Sterling. Mr. Galloway has it." "Not anymore," Jasmine said. "Bump him. Put him in 24B, middle seat, economy." Sarah hesitated, her hands hovering over the keyboard. "He will scream. He will get me fired." "He won't fire you," Jasmine said, leaning in. because in about an hour, he won't have the authority to fire anyone. Do it. If he asks, tell him it was a system error and the flight is oversold. Tell him the VIP in 1A is board priority. Sarah typed, a grin slowly spreading across her face. She had been yelled at by Preston Galloway 3 times this month. With pleasure, ma'am. The boarding process was chaotic. The rain had delayed everything, and tempers were short. When the gate agent announced pre-boarding for first class and Diamond Medallion members, Preston Galloway pushed his way to the front of the line, Lydia and Greg in tow. Preston slapped his boarding pass onto the scanner. Beep, beep. Red light. What is this? Preston barked at the gate agent. Fix it. The agent typed for a moment, looking confused. Sir, it seems there's been a seat reassignment. You've been moved to 24B. Excuse me? Preston's voice went up an octave. I am the regional vice president. I am flying to a board meeting. You do not move me. I'm sorry, sir, the agent said, intimidated but firm. The system shows a priority override for seat 1A. It's out of my hands. The flight is full. If you want to fly, you have to take 24B. Preston looked like he was about to punch the monitor. He turned to Lydia. Call dispatch. Get the director of logistics on the phone now. I can't, Lydia said, staring at her phone. No signal in the terminal. The storm. Fine. Preston snatched the new boarding pass. I will fire everyone in this airport when we land. Everyone! Get on the plane! He stormed down the jet bridge, fuming. He marched onto the plane, ready to scream at the purser. He turned left toward first class out of habit, but the flight attendant blocked him. Sir, 24B is that way, she said, pointing to the right, toward the crowded economy section, where a baby was already crying. I want to see who is in my seat, Preston hissed. He craned his neck, looking past the attendant into the first-class cabin. There, settled comfortably in seat 1A, sipping a glass of pre-flight champagne, was the woman in the hoodie. Jasmine didn't look back. She was looking out the window, watching the rain. Preston froze. His brain couldn't process it. The riff-raff from the lounge? In his seat? You, Preston shouted, trying to push past the attendant. You have got to be kidding me. You stole my seat. The flight attendant, a veteran named Marcus, stepped in. Sir, you need to lower your voice, or you will be removed from this flight. That woman is a fraud, Preston yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Jasmine. She is scamming the airline. She's probably used a stolen credit card. I want her off. Jasmine turned her head slowly. She lowered her sunglasses. She looked Preston dead in the eye. Mr. Galloway, she said, her voice carrying through the sudden silence of the cabin. You're holding up the line. Some of us have work to do. You know my name? Preston blinked, thrown off balance. Everyone knows the name of the man who yells the loudest, she replied coolly. Go to your seat, or get off. I really don't care which. Lydia grabbed Preston's arm. Preston, people are filming, she whispered, nodding toward a teenager in row 3, holding up an iPhone. Just sit down. We'll deal with her in New York. We'll have security waiting at the gate to arrest her for fraud. Preston took a deep breath, adjusting his suit jacket. He glared at Jasmine with pure, unadulterated hatred. Enjoy the champagne, he spat. It's going to be the most expensive drink of your life. When we land, you're going to jail. He turned and stomped his way back to economy, squeezing his expensive suit into the middle seat between an oversized man eating a tuna sandwich and a woman with a cat carrier on her lap. Jasmine watched him go, then pressed the call button. Marcus appeared instantly. Yes, ma'am. Marcus, she said, glancing at his name tag. Do we have Wi-Fi active on the ground? For you? Yes. Good. She unlocked her tablet. I need to send an email to the board of directors. And please, bring me the passenger manifest. I want to know exactly who is working under Mr. Galloway today." As the plane taxied to the runway, Jasmine began to type. The subject line of the email was simple: immediate restructuring of operations, Midwest region. She wasn't just going to fire him. She was going to dismantle his entire kingdom brick by brick before the wheels even touched the tarmac in New York. The "wait outside" comment was about to become the most expensive 2 words in Preston Galloway's life. The flight was bumpy. Thunderheads rose like bruised knuckles over Ohio, shaking the Airbus A321. In economy, Preston Galloway was in hell. The man next to him had fallen asleep on his shoulder, drooling slightly on the Italian wool. The baby 3 rows back hadn't stopped screaming. But what ate at Preston wasn't the discomfort. It was the humiliation. He, the VP, the man who was supposed to be the next COO, was sitting in the back of the bus while some street rat was drinking his Dom Perignon in his seat. "I'm checking her background," Lydia texted him from seat 24C. She had gotten the aisle. "I took a picture of her in the lounge, running it through the company database." 10 minutes later, Lydia turned pale. She nudged Preston. "What?" he snapped, wiping drool off his shoulder. "Preston," Lydia whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at this." She held up her phone. It was a Google image search result. The photo on the screen showed a woman in a sharp white power suit ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. The headline read, "Jasmine Sterling sells tech giant Vertex for $4.2 billion, rumored to be eyeing the airline industry." Preston stared at the phone. He looked at the face. He looked at the eyes. It was the woman in seat 1A. "No," Preston croaked. "That's not possible. She was wearing a hoodie. I told her to wait outside." "She's the buyer," Lydia hissed. "Preston, she's the new owner." Preston felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold and dizzy. He remembered snapping his fingers at her. He remembered calling her riffraff. He remembered threatening to have her arrested. "We have to fix this," Preston said, panic rising in his chest like bile. "We have to apologize, now." "We can't go up there," Lydia said. "The seatbelt sign is on." "Screw the sign!" Preston unbuckled his belt. He stood up, almost knocking over the drink cart that was inching down the aisle. "Sir, sit down!" a flight attendant yelled. "I need to speak to the woman in 1A, Preston shouted, pushing past the cart. "It's an emergency, corporate emergency." He stumbled up the aisle, the plane lurching violently as it hit an air pocket. He grabbed the curtain separating economy from first class and ripped it aside. Jasmine was working on her laptop. She didn't look up as Preston practically fell into the first-class cabin, his hair mussed, his tie crooked. "Ms. Sterling!" Preston gasped, holding on to a seat back for balance. "Ms. Sterling, please! I didn't know!" Jasmine paused typing. She slowly closed her laptop. The cabin was silent. The other first-class passengers, wealthy bankers, a famous actress, watched with rapt attention. "Mr. Galloway," Jasmine said, her voice ice-cold. "You are violating flight safety regulations. Return to your seat." "I am so sorry," Preston babbled, sweat pouring down his forehead. "If I had known it was you, obviously, the protocols are different for VIPs. I was just trying to protect the lounge for people like you. It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Jasmine unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She faced him, and despite being shorter, she towered over him. "You judged me based on how I looked. You treated me with contempt because you thought I had no power. That isn't a misunderstanding, Preston. That's a character flaw. And unfortunately for you, I don't hire character flaws." "You can't fire me," Preston stammered. "I have a contract. I have tenure." "Actually," Jasmine said, pulling a folded document from her bag, the one she had been reading in the lounge. "I was reading your contract in the lounge. Clause 4, Section B. Conduct detrimental to the company image. Harassing a passenger, screaming at gate agents, publicly humiliating yourself." She took a step closer. "I accepted your resignation 20 minutes ago via email to the board. They accepted it immediately." "I didn't resign." "You did," Jasmine smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "When you told the owner of the company to wait outside, you resigned from any future you had in this industry." The plane dipped again, and Preston stumbled back. "Marcus," Jasmine said to the flight attendant, "please escort this passenger back to his assigned seat. If he resists, have the air marshal zip-tie him. I want to finish my flight in peace." Preston looked around. He saw the faces of the other passengers. They weren't looking at him with respect anymore. They were looking at him with pity and disgust. He was broken. He allowed Marcus to guide him back to economy, back to the crying baby and the tuna sandwich. The walk back was 1,000 times longer than the walk up. Every eye in the plane seemed to be burning a hole in his cheapened suit. But the karma wasn't done yet. Not even close. The descent into New York's JFK International Airport was smooth for the plane, but turbulent for the soul of Preston Galloway. Trapped in the middle seat of row 24, he had nowhere to run. His phone had died an hour ago, conveniently right after Lydia had texted him that legal had flagged his corporate account. He sat in a silence that was louder than the screaming jet engines, sandwiched between the scent of tuna fish and the palpable judgment of the passengers around him. The "wait outside" comment played on a loop in his mind. He had said it with such casual cruelty. Now, stripped of his title, his legroom, and his dignity, he realized he was the one on the outside looking in. As the wheels touched down with a screech of burning rubber, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. The local time is 9:15 p.m. We ask that everyone remain seated with their seatbelts fastened. We have been instructed by airport security to hold the aircraft at the gate. Local authorities will be boarding the plane immediately upon arrival to escort a passenger off. Thank you for your cooperation." A ripple of whispers went through the cabin. Preston straightened up, a flicker of his old arrogance sparking back to life. Authorities. Of course. He turned to the man eating the tuna sandwich. "You see?" Preston whispered, a manic grin stretching his face. "She's the fraud. I told you. She impersonated the CEO. The police are here for her." The man chewed slowly, unimpressed. "Buddy, you look like you're about to throw up. Just shut up." The plane taxied to Gate 12 at Terminal 5. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but the flight attendants immediately stood in the aisles, blocking anyone from standing. "Please remain seated," Marcus shouted, his eyes locking onto row 24. The front cabin door opened. 2 officers from the Port Authority Police Department stepped on board, followed by a man in a sharp grey suit holding a briefcase. Aerolux's General Counsel, Arthur Pendleton. Preston waved his hand frantically from the back. Arthur, back here! I'm the victim. She's in 1A." Arthur Pendleton didn't look at 1A. He looked straight down the long, narrow tube of the fuselage. He spotted Preston waving. He didn't wave back. He nodded to the officers. The procession moved down the aisle. The hush in the cabin was heavy. As they passed first class, Jasmine Sterling didn't even turn her head. She was calmly putting her laptop into a bag. The officers stopped at row 24. "Preston Galloway?" the taller officer asked. "Yes, finally," Preston said, unbuckling his belt. "Officer, the woman in seat 1A has committed identity fraud and corporate espionage. I want to press charges immediately. Arthur, tell them who I am." Arthur Pendleton sighed. He looked tired. "They know who you are, Preston. They're here for you." Preston froze, half standing. "What?" "You're under arrest," the officer said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Arrest? For what? Being rude?" Preston laughed nervously. "That's not a crime." "No," Arthur said, his voice carrying clearly to the silent audience of 150 passengers. "But embezzling $1.2 million from the maintenance budget to pay for your Hamptons renovation is. And so is falsifying safety inspection records to cover the costs." The blood drained from Preston's face so fast he looked like a corpse. "How did you—" "Ms. Sterling," Arthur gestured toward the front of the plane. "She had a lot of time to read the audit reports in the lounge while you made her wait outside. She noticed the discrepancies in the Q3 operational costs. She emailed me the proofs mid-flight. We ran the numbers. It's over, Preston." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "Turn around," the officer ordered. As Preston was hauled into the aisle, the passengers in economy, the people he had sneered at, the people he called cattle, began to clap. It started with the tuna sandwich man, then the woman with the cat, and soon the entire back of the plane was erupting in applause. Preston was marched down the aisle, his head hanging low. As he passed seat 1A, Jasmine finally looked up. She held a glass of champagne in her hand. "Mr. Galloway," she said softly. The police paused. Preston looked at her, his eyes rimmed with tears of rage and humiliation. "You missed the board meeting," she said, taking a sip. "But don't worry. I'll give them your regards." She turned back to the window. Preston was dragged off the plane, the applause of the riff-raff ringing in his ears like a death knell. The next morning, the Aerolux headquarters in Manhattan was a hive of panicked activity. The video of Preston's arrest had gone viral overnight. It had 4 million views on TikTok. The hashtag #YourWaitOutsideCEO was trending #1 worldwide. But the real storm was inside the boardroom on the 40th floor. The massive oak table was surrounded by the remaining executives. They were terrified. They had heard the rumors. The turnaround queen had arrived, and she had already taken down the biggest bully in the company before even stepping foot in the building. Lydia Banks sat near the head of the table, her hands shaking. She had spent the entire night scrubbing her emails, deleting Slack messages, and preparing a speech about how she was a victim of Preston's toxic management style. She was ready to throw him under the bus to save her own skin. The double doors swung open. Jasmine Sterling walked in. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was wearing a tailored crimson suit that screamed power. Behind her walked Greg, Preston's former terrified assistant, looking cleaner, calmer, and holding a tablet. The room stood up. "Sit," Jasmine commanded. She didn't take the head of the table. She walked around it, pacing like a panther. "You all saw the news," Jasmine began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Preston Galloway is in federal custody. But Preston was a symptom, not the disease. You don't get a man that arrogant without a culture that feeds him." She stopped behind Lydia's chair. Lydia stopped breathing. "Lydia Banks," Jasmine said. "Ms. Sterling," Lydia said, forcing a smile, turning her chair to face her. "I just want to say, what happened yesterday was appalling. I tried to stop him, but Preston was—" "Greg," Jasmine interrupted. "Read the email from March 14th. Greg cleared his throat. He tapped the tablet. "From Lydia Banks to Preston Galloway. Subject, hiring protocol. Body. Preston, I filtered out the resume for the operations manager. He's qualified, but he's too urban. I don't think he fits the Aerolux image. I put his resume in the shredder. Let's hire the guy from your frat instead." The room gasped. Lydia's face went white. "That is out of context," Lydia stammered. "I meant—" I have 500 emails just like that, Lydia, Jasmine said, leaning down so her face was inches from Lydia's. Systematic discrimination, bullying, enabling corruption. You sat in that lounge and laughed while he belittled me. You categorized me as low rent. You are the director of human resources. You are supposed to protect the people, not the predators. I have tenure, Lydia whispered, tears forming. I have a severance package. No, Jasmine said, standing up straight. You have a termination letter for cause. Gross misconduct. No severance. No benefits. And since Greg here was the one doing all your actual work while you were online shopping, he will be taking over as interim director of HR effective immediately. Greg's jaw dropped. Me? Yes, you. Jasmine smiled at him. You tried to warn Preston. You showed empathy. That's what this company needs. Jasmine pointed to the door. Lydia, security is waiting to escort you out. You can wait outside on the curb for your Uber. I believe it's raining again. Lydia grabbed her purse and ran out of the room, sobbing. Jasmine looked at the remaining executives. Anyone else want to explain why they shouldn't be fired today? Silence. Good, Jasmine said, finally sitting at the head of the table. Now, let's talk about how we're going to fix this airline. First order of business. We are getting rid of the Diamond Lounge exclusivity. If you buy a ticket, you get treated with respect. Period. 6 months. To the rest of the world, 6 months was a flicker of time. To Jasmine Sterling, it was a fiscal half-year of triumph. Under her leadership, Aerolux had transformed from a bloated, sinking ship into the darling of Wall Street. Stock prices were up 40%. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. The airline had ditched the elitist velvet ropes and adopted a philosophy of radical hospitality. But for Preston Galloway, 6 months was an eternity. It was a slow-motion car crash that never seemed to end. The hard karma didn't hit him all at once like a lightning bolt. It eroded him, day by day, like water torturing a stone. It started with the arrest. Then came the freezing of his assets. The federal government had a way of locking doors you didn't even know you had. His offshore accounts, his diversified portfolios, his emergency cash reserves, all inaccessible. Then came the silence. The friends he had collected over 20 years of climbing the corporate ladder vanished. No one returned his calls. No one offered a character reference. Even his wife, who had enjoyed the penthouse and the galas, didn't stick around for the fallout. She filed for divorce 3 days after his mugshot appeared on CNN, citing irreconcilable differences, though Preston knew the only difference was the balance in his checking account. She took the dog. She took the artwork. She left him with the shame. Now the man who used to scream at waiters if his sparkling water wasn't chilled to exactly 4 degrees was living in a basement studio in Queens. The walls were thin, smelling of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. He slept on a mattress he had bought second-hand. He was radioactive. He had applied for consulting gigs, mid-level management, even entry-level sales jobs. But the moment HR managers Googled Preston Galloway, the algorithm buried him. The first result was the video of him screaming at Jasmine. The second was his mugshot. The third was a "Where are they now?" article mocking his downfall. He was broke. He was alone. And for the first time in his life, he was hungry. Not for ambition, but for food. To survive while awaiting his trial, Preston had to humble himself in a way he never thought possible. He became a driver for a ride-share app. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind of New York night where the rain feels personal, cold, relentless, and soaking into the bone. Preston was parked a block away from the St. Regis Hotel. His office was no longer a corner suite with a view of the Hudson. It was a 2014 Toyota Camry with a dent in the rear bumper and a heater that rattled when it went above setting 2. His phone pinged, the sound harsh in the quiet car. Ride request, VIP tier. Pickup, St. Regis Hotel. Destination, JFK Terminal 5. Preston sighed, rubbing his eyes. A VIP ride. That meant he had to be extra polite. He had to open the door. He adjusted his cap, pulling it low over his eyes. He wore a mask, partly for health, but mostly because he was terrified of being recognized. He pulled up to the gilded entrance of the St. Regis. The doorman, a man Preston had walked past 100 times without acknowledging, waved him forward. The back door opened. A woman slid in, bringing with her the scent of expensive rain and subtle, commanding perfume. "JFK, please," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "And can we hurry? I have a flight to London, and the traffic looks terrible." Preston froze. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He knew that voice. It was a voice that haunted his nightmares. It was the voice that had dismantled his life with a single sentence. He glanced in the rearview mirror, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. It was her. Jasmine Sterling. She looked different than she had in the lounge. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was dressed in a trench coat that probably cost more than Preston's car. She was typing furiously on her phone, her face illuminated by the screen. She looked tired but radiant, possessed of a calm, steady power that Preston had tried to fake his entire career. She didn't recognize the back of his head. Why would she? To her, he was just part of the machinery of the city. He was the help. "Kick her out," a voice in his head screamed. "Tell her to get out. Scream at her. Blame her." But then reality crashed down. He had 14,060 in his bank account. Rent was due tomorrow. If he cancelled the ride, he would be fined. If he caused a scene, he would be deactivated. He swallowed his pride. It tasted like ash. "Yes, Mom," he mumbled, his voice unrecognizable even to himself. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, merging into the sea of red taillights. The drive was agonizing. For 40 minutes, Preston was trapped in a metal box with the architect of his destruction. He drove efficiently, navigating the slick streets, while Jasmine worked in the back seat. He couldn't help but listen. She dialed a number. "Greg?" "Yes, I'm in the car. Talk to me." Preston flinched at the name. Greg. His old assistant. "Okay," Jasmine said, pausing. "I saw the numbers for the ground crew. They've been working overtime because of the storm season. The standard contract says they don't get overtime pay until 50 hours, I know. But Greg, they're human beings. Pay them." Preston listened, stunned. In his day, he would have fired anyone who suggested paying overtime that wasn't legally required. He would have called it fiscal irresponsibility. "I don't care what the board says about the margins," Jasmine continued, her voice firm. "If the people aren't happy, the planes don't fly. If we miss the quarterly projection, take it out of my executive bonus. Yes, I'm serious. I don't need a third house, Greg. I need a ground crew that feels respected. Make it happen." She hung up. Preston stared at the road, the windshield wipers slapping a rhythm of shame, shame, shame. "Take it out of my bonus." He had never said those words. He had never even thought those words. He had embezzled maintenance funds to renovate his kitchen. He had screamed at Greg for bringing him the wrong coffee. He had treated people like disposable tissues. And here was this woman, the riff-raff he had ordered to wait outside, sacrificing her own payout to ensure the baggage handlers could pay their rent. The realization hit him harder than the prison sentence looming over his head. He hadn't just lost his job because of a bad moment. He had lost his job because he was a small, selfish man. The universe hadn't conspired against him. It had simply corrected an error. They approached JFK. The terminal lights loomed ahead, bright and blinding. Terminal 5, the scene of the crime. "Pull up here, please," Jasmine said. Preston pulled the Camry to the curb. He put the car in park. His hands were shaking. He debated just unlocking the doors and letting her leave. He could stay anonymous. He could remain a ghost. But something inside him broke. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was the sheer weight of the secrets he was carrying. Or maybe, for the first time in his life, he wanted to be seen for what he really was. He turned around. He pulled his mask down. "Miss Sterling," Preston said. His voice was raspy, stripped of all its old bluster. Jasmine looked up from her bag. She frowned, squinting slightly in the dim light of the car. Her eyes scanned his face, the grey stubble, the deep lines of stress, the cheap jacket. Then recognition dawned. Her eyes went wide. She stopped moving. "Preston," she whispered. She didn't sound angry. She sounded shocked. She looked from his face to the steering wheel, to the ride-share app on her phone, connecting the dots of his plummet. Preston braced himself. He expected her to laugh. He expected her to pull out her phone and record him, to post it on Twitter. "Look who's driving me. The wait outside guy. He deserved it. He knew he deserved it." Preston choked on the words. Tears pricked his eyes, hot and humiliating. I heard what you said on the phone, about the bonus." Jasmine sat back, her expression unreadable. She studied him, not as an enemy, but as a tragedy. "You lost everything," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I lost the house," Preston confessed, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. "My wife left. I have a trial next month. I live in a basement." He looked down at his hands. "I just wanted you to know. You were right. About everything. I was a monster." The silence in the car was heavy. The rain drummed on the roof. Jasmine reached for the door handle. She could have ended him right there with a witty remark. She could have crushed him. "People change, Preston," Jasmine said softly. "Or they don't. It looks like life forced you to change." "It's too late," he whispered. "No," Jasmine said. She opened the door, the wind rushing in. "You're still breathing. You still have your hands. You still have time. It's only too late if you refuse to learn." She stepped out onto the wet pavement. She didn't report him. She didn't mock him. She didn't demand a refund. She leaned back in, looking him dead in the eye. "I tipped you in the app," she said. "It's a long drive back to Queens. Drive safe." She slammed the door and walked away, her trench coat billowing behind her as she disappeared into the automatic doors of the terminal she now owned, the terminal where he was no longer welcome. Preston sat frozen. He looked at his phone, mounted on the dashboard. Ping. Notification. Tip received. $500. He stared at the number. $500. It was more than he had made in the last week combined. It was mercy. It was grace. It was unearned, undeserved, and overwhelming. He gripped the steering wheel, lowered his forehead onto the cheap plastic, and for the first time since he was a child, Preston Galloway wept. He cried for the money. Yes. But mostly, he cried because the woman he had treated like trash had just shown him more humanity in 5 minutes than he had shown anyone in 20 years. The rain didn't just fall. It wept against the windshield of the dented Toyota Camry. Inside the vehicle, the air was stagnant, smelling of old pine air freshener and the damp wool of Preston's cheap coat. But the only thing Preston could see was the soft blue glow of his phone screen illuminating the wrinkles that stress and poverty had carved into his face over the last 6 months. Tip received, 500 saxelos. Customer note, good luck, $500. In his previous life, $500 was a bottle of wine he would order at dinner just to impress a client, only to leave it half finished on the table. It was the cost of a tie he wore once. It was a rounding error in his expense account. Now it was life support. It was his rent for the next 2 weeks. It was groceries. It was the difference between keeping the lights on in his studio apartment or sitting in the dark. He stared at the number until his vision blurred. His chest tightened, a physical ache that sat right beneath his sternum. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a profound, suffocating shame. Jasmine Sterling, the woman he had tried to crush like an insect, the woman he had mocked for her appearance, had just handed him a lifeline. She hadn't screamed at him. She hadn't reported him to the ride-share app to get him banned. She had looked at him with eyes that held no hate, only a pity so deep it felt like a physical blow. She pitied me, Preston whispered to the empty car. The sound of his own voice was pathetic. He couldn't just drive away. Not yet. He turned off the engine. The silence of the car was immediately replaced by the rhythmic drumming of the rain. He needed to see it. He needed to see what he had lost. He needed to understand why he was here, shivering in a Camry, while she was ascending to the clouds. Preston pulled his cap lower, turned up the collar of his jacket, and stepped out into the storm. The wind whipped at him, cold and biting, but he marched toward the sliding glass doors of Terminal 5. Inside, the terminal was a cathedral of light and sound. The air smelled of sanitized floors, expensive coffee, and jet fuel, the perfume of his former life. For 20 years, this building had been his kingdom. When he walked through these doors in the past, he was flanked by assistants. Porters would rush to take his bags. Security guards would nod respectfully. He walked with his chin up, slicing through the crowd like a shark through water. Today, he was just debris in the current. He walked toward the Aerolux check-in counters, keeping his head down, avoiding eye contact. He was terrified someone would recognize him. But then the bitter realization hit. No one looked at him. To the rushing passengers, to the staff, to the world, he was invisible. He was just a middle-aged man in a worn coat. He was the help. He found a spot behind a large concrete pillar near the back of the check-in area, and he watched. The Aerolux counter had changed. The harsh, sterile lighting he had insisted upon, to keep the staff alert, was gone, replaced by warmer, welcoming tones. The rigid, militaristic lines were gone, replaced by an organized but flowing system. And then he saw him. Greg. The young man Preston had terrorized for 3 years. The assistant he had called useless, slow, and an embarrassment. Greg was standing in the center of the lobby, wearing a suit that actually fit him. He wasn't hunched over, juggling 3 phones in a panic. He was standing tall. He was smiling. Preston watched as an elderly woman, clearly confused and distressed, approached Greg. In the old days, Preston would have signaled security to move her along, complaining that she was clogging the flow. He watched Greg kneel slightly to be at eye level with the woman. He watched Greg listen, nod, and then gently take her bag, guiding her personally toward the priority lane. Greg placed a hand on her shoulder, a human connection. The woman smiled, her anxiety melting away. It was a small moment, insignificant to the operations of a global airline, but to Preston, watching from the shadows, it was a revelation. He's good at this, Preston thought, the realization hitting him like a shock. Greg was always good at this. I was the one who stopped him. He looked around the terminal. He saw the diversity of the staff, faces he would have filtered out, people he would have deemed not right for the image, working in harmony. He saw efficiency born not of fear, but of cooperation. Jasmine Sterling hadn't just changed the logo. She had exorcised the ghost of his leadership. The airline wasn't failing without him. It was thriving because he was gone. A harsh voice broke his trance. "Hey, you can't loiter here." Preston jumped, his heart hammering. A security guard, a young man with a stern face, was standing over him. "This is a secure area," the guard said, his hand resting near his belt. "If you're not flying, you need to wait outside." The words echoed in Preston's skull. Wait outside? The irony was so sharp it almost made him laugh. The universe wasn't just punishing him, it was writing poetry. In the past, Preston would have exploded. He would have demanded the guard's badge number. He would have screamed, "Do you know who I am?" But Preston looked at the guard. He looked at the badge. He looked at the busy terminal behind him, a world that moved faster and smoother without his friction. "I'm sorry," Preston said, his voice quiet and rough. "I was just looking. I used to work here." The guard softened slightly, but didn't back down. "Yeah? Well, rules are rules, buddy. You gotta move." "I know," Preston said. He looked back at the counter one last time. Greg was laughing with a colleague. The check-in screens glowed with the Aerolux logo, bright and triumphant. "I know." Preston turned around. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He walked back toward the sliding doors. As the automatic doors hissed open, the cold wind hit him again, stripping away the warmth of the terminal. He stepped out onto the curb, the rain instantly soaking through his thin jacket. He walked back to his car, the $500 tip still waiting for him on the screen. He would use it to pay his lawyer. His trial was next month. The evidence was overwhelming. He would likely spend the next 3 to 5 years in a minimum security facility. He would lose his freedom, just as he had lost his reputation. But as he sat in the driver's seat, watching the planes take off into the dark, stormy sky, Preston Galloway realized the prison wasn't waiting for him in the future. He had been in prison for years. He had built a cell out of arrogance, walled it with insecurity, and barred it with cruelty. He had lived in a solitary confinement of his own making, terrified that if he let anyone in, they would see how small he really was. Jasmine Sterling hadn't destroyed him. She had just turned on the lights. He put the car in gear. He had a long drive back to Queens. He had a long road ahead to redemption, if such a thing was even possible for a man like him. He merged into the traffic, just another pair of red taillights in the sea of cars, finally and truly waiting his turn. They say that pride comes before the fall, but for Preston Galloway, pride was the fall. He judged a book by its cover and paid the ultimate price. Jasmine Sterling didn't just fire a management team, she fired a mindset. She proved that true power doesn't need to shout, and real leadership isn't about exclusion, it's about empathy. In the end, we are all just passengers. Whether you're in seat 1A or 24B, the plane goes to the same place. The only thing that separates us is how we treat the people sitting next to us. Preston learned too late that when you try to make others feel small, you are the one who disappears. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Jasmine in that taxi? Would you have tipped him, or would you have let him suffer? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story of justice served. Thanks for watching.